Hey, Brian Kelly here from Zombie Guitar. Here in this video I want to talk about modal chord progressions. So I'm going to use 4 popular song examples, each of which uses a modal chord progression, and then I'm going to solo over top of each one of these using the appropriate mode. So a lot of people think that this whole modes thing, they think that it's the lead guitar player is what dictates the mode. That's actually not the case. It's the rhythm section that dictates the mode. Once the rhythm section has established the mode, you as the lead guitar player will then follow by playing the appropriate mode. So if the chord progression is, say, G Dorian, you as the lead guitar player will say, okay, that's in G Dorian, I'm going to now play the G Dorian mode. So modes have nothing to do with patterns, so you can play the G Dorian anywhere up and down the entire neck of the guitar. It's only 7 notes. So those 7 notes are going to form a bunch of different patterns, but it's all going to be the G Dorian mode because that's already been established by the chord progression. You can't just decide, I want to play Aeolian, or I want to play Lydian, or I want to play Ionian, because that's not your call. It's the rhythm section's call. The rhythm section dictates the mode. You as the lead guitar player follow. All right, so just understand that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use what is known as the familiar patterns method. And what that is you think back to the parent major scale and then use familiar scale patterns, because you may be more familiar in thinking in terms of major scale patterns, but you just have to recognize where the tonal center is within those scale patterns. So this is only one approach to soloing over modes. There's a bunch of other approaches. I talk about all the different approaches on the Zombie Guitar website. This is just one of several approaches. So it's a 3-step approach. The first step is to identify the characteristic chord combination. The second step is to assign a number between 1 and 7 to each one of the modes. The third step is to then think back to the parent major scale. So if you are in G Dorian, if the mode has been established that it's G Dorian, and you go through this 3-step process, and then you determine that the parent major scale is F major, it may be helpful for you to think, okay, I already know my F major scale, I can solo fluently in the F major scale up and down the entire neck of the guitar, but I just have to be aware that the tonal center within these patterns is the note G. This isn't F major, this isn't F Ionian, this is G Dorian. I'm just familiar with F major scale patterns because I've spent years practicing my major scale patterns, so I can find my reference positions, I can fluently play up and down the neck, but I'm just using those patterns, but being aware of where the note G is within those patterns. So that's what I mean by the familiar patterns approach. So let's look at the 3 steps now. All right, so I'm going to move quickly here because this video is actually about practical examples and not so much about the theory. So if you want to learn the theory, I have a 3-part mode series that I'll put a link to below. I go super in-depth into modes. I go slowly. I talk about all this stuff. I talk about relative modes, parallel modes, modal chord progressions, characteristic chord combination, determining the parent major scale. I go through all of that stuff in that 3-part series. So I'm just going to go quickly here through the 3-step process of working your way back to the parent major scale. If you want a slower explanation, links below. So step 1 is to recognize the characteristic chord combination. So what do I mean by that? So for Dorian, if you see a minor 1 chord and a major 4 chord together, that is what lets you know that it's Dorian. So if it's minor 1, your major 4 is going to be on the same fret, but rooted on the A string. So minor 1, major 4. So minor 1, major 4, you see those 2 chords together, that is Dorian. It's going to be G Dorian because G minor would be the tonal center of that progression. So you're going to then use the G Dorian scale patterns, and your note within the scale patterns is going to be the note G. So that's the characteristic chord progression for Dorian. For Phrygian, it's going to be a minor 1 and then a flat major 2. So that means here's minor 1, and then here's 2 flat. Like a flat 2 is just 1/2 step higher, major. So alright, so minor 1, flat major 2 is going to be the indication that it's Phrygian. So if that was the chord progression, if that was the characteristic chord combination that I spotted, I would think, okay, that's G Phrygian. I would then play the G Phrygian scale patterns as my soloing framework because the mode has been dictated to be G Phrygian. So the next one would be Lydian. So Lydian is going to be a major 1 chord followed by a major 2 chord. So those are two major chords separated by a whole step. So here's your major 1, here's major 2. So if I saw that, if I recognize that progression, I would think, okay, that's G Lydian. I'm going to play G Lydian over that progression. So the last example is going to be Mixolydian. So when you see a major chord followed by another major chord, which is a whole step lower, known as the flat major 7 chord, then that's your indication that it's a Mixolydian progression. So major chord followed by another major chord that's 1 whole step lower. That's a flat 7 interval in relation to the 1 whole step lower. Alright, so that would tell me that that is G Mixolydian. I would then play my G Mixolydian scale up and down the entire neck of the guitar as I soloed over that chord progression. So that's step 1, determining the characteristic chord combination. Step 2 is you then assign a number 1 through 7 to each mode. So Ionian is 1, Dorian is 2, Phrygian is 3, Lydian is 4, Mixolydian is 5, Aeolian is 6, and Locrian is 7. So you have your numbers 1 through 7. So using this information, knowing what mode you're starting with, then knowing the 7 numbers, you can then think back to the parent major scale by using this super easy scale pattern right here. So this is a major scale pattern just spanning 3 strings. So it looks like this. You can play the scale pattern anywhere. I'm just going to play it right here on the 5th fret. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So if you know what mode you're starting in and you need to work your way backwards to the 1 being the parent major scale that you're looking to determine, so you can use your more familiar scale patterns to help you solo over the modal chord progression, you can use this information right here. So let's say that I am in, I don't know, G Dorian. Okay, so if I'm in G Dorian, I know that Dorian is 2. I would then take this scale pattern and place it on the fretboard such that the note G lands on the 2. So it's right here. So I know that if G Dorian is 2, the 1 is F. So the parent major scale of G Dorian is F major. So if I'm in, say, B Phrygian, I would do the same thing. So Phrygian equals 3. So I just have to take this scale pattern and find where the note B is. So there's B on the 7th fret, that's 3. So that scale pattern falls right there. That means if B is 3, 1 must be G. So I'll do one more and then we'll move on to the examples. So, say I'm in A Lydian. So A Lydian is 4. All right, so if A is 4, we'll go to this A up here. So if A is 4, the scale pattern right here falls right here. So if A is 4, E would be your 1. So E is the parent major scale of A Lydian. So if I want to solo over an A Lydian chord progression, I may find it helpful to think, okay, this shares the same scale patterns as the E major scale. I know my E major scale. I can run up and down the fretboard in my sleep in the E major scale. I just have to be aware of the fact that A is the tonal center within these patterns because it's A Lydian. It's not E major, it's A Lydian. I'm just using the patterns from E major. All right, so that is basically the 3-step process. Again, I talked about that stuff much more in depth in that 3-part series if you want to check that out if I moved too quickly here. Other than that, let's just get to the examples. So now we're going to look at 4 popular song examples that use modal chord progressions, and then we're going to figure out the parent major scale after we identify the mode. So the first one is going to be Evil Ways by Santana. So that chord progression is a G minor and a C major chord. So G minor is your 1 chord. That's a minor 1 chord. C major is a major chord. So minor 1, major 4. That's a characteristic chord combination of Dorian. So if G Dorian is our mode, then we have to move on to step 2. So step 2 is to identify the number. So Dorian is 2. Ionian is 1. Dorian is 2. So we know Dorian is 2. So if G is our 2, then what is the 1? You take that scale pattern, you put that right here. So if G is 2, F is 1. So F is the parent major scale for G Dorian. So if I want to solo over top of this Dorian chord progression, I can use my F major scale patterns anywhere on the entire neck of the guitar, but I'm not going to focus on the note F as my tonic note within those patterns. That's not my tonal center. My tonal center is going to be the note G within those patterns. All right, so F major is the parent major scale of the G Dorian mode. So that is the first example. So the second example is going to be Jane Says by Jane's Addiction, and that goes like this. So you could also use bar chords here. Alright, so you have a 1 chord that is major, followed by a major 2 chord. So major 1, major 2, that's the characteristic chord combination for Lydian. So this is G Lydian. So then you have to apply a number. 4 is Lydian. All right, so Lydian is the 4th of what? You can figure that out by using the scale pattern. So find your note G. Since it's the 4th, it's going to be on the A string. So find your note G on the A string here. Here's your note G up here on the 10th fret of the A string. So apply the scale pattern here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 is here, 1 is right here. That is the note D. 10th fret of the low E string is the note D. So that tells me that the parent major scale for the G Lydian mode is going to be D major. So if I want to solo over this chord progression, I can use my D major scale patterns all up and down the neck of the guitar. I just have to be aware that G is now the tonal center within the scale patterns because this is the G Lydian mode as dictated by the chord progression. So the third example is going to be Hey Jude by the Beatles, and that goes like this. And then it repeats itself. So it's holding out on that F chord for a while, F major chord for a while, and then it's moving one whole step lower to play another major chord. And then it plays another chord, and then it moves back to that F major chord. So there's a strong sense, a strong feeling that F major is the 1 chord. F major is the tonal center. So if F major is going to be the tonal center, Where does F major move to? F major moves to a chord that is one whole step lower. So that would be an E flat major chord. So a major chord followed by another major chord that is one whole step lower, otherwise known as the one chord, major one chord, followed by a flat major 7 chord. That's your characteristic chord combination. The fact that it has 3 chords in it, don't worry about that. Just the fact you're looking for the characteristic chord combination within a chord progression. So we see that characteristic chord combination, major chord one whole step lower. That characteristic chord combination is enough to tell us, okay, that's mixolydian. All right, so if F major is our one chord, that would be F mixolydian. That's our mode. So F mixolydian is what number? So Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, mixolydian. Mixolydian is 5. So if F is 5, take that scale pattern here. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so B flat. B flat is going to be the parent major scale of the F mixolydian mode. All right, and then the final one, this is Get Lucky by Daft Punk. So this one's going to be a little tricky, but the same theory, it still applies, so you can still use it. So let me show you. This is a 4-chord chord progression that goes like this. So that is a 4-chord chord progression. It starts out on the B minor chord. It then moves up to the D major chord. It then moves up to the F sharp minor chord. It then ends on the E major chord. And then it goes back to the B minor chord. So right there, E major, B minor, E major, B minor. B minor is your one chord. All right, so that's your minor one chord. B minor is your minor one chord. In relation to that, you see this E major chord here. So minor 1, major 4. So anytime you see that combination together in a chord progression, even if it's 3 chords or 4 chords, in this case, minor 1, major 4, that tells you Dorian. That's your characteristic chord combination. So B Dorian is going to be the mode. So Dorian is 2. So if Dorian is 2, you take the scale pattern, 2, there's 1. The parent major scale is the A major scale. All right, so this whole thinking back to the parent major scale is just one approach to modal soloing. So other people may think that this is more difficulty than what it's worth, whereas other people may think that this is the way to go. So, if you're soloing over something that's in B Dorian and it helps you to think, okay, B Dorian shares the same scale patterns as A major, therefore I'm going to use the A major scale patterns, but I'm just going to be aware of the fact that B is the root. If that helps you, then this method is great. This method would be good for you. There's other people that may think, okay, well, if I'm soloing in B Dorian, why would I think about A at all? There's nothing to do with A. This is B. This is B Dorian. B is my scale root. B is my tonal center. It's only going to confuse me to think of A. There's A and B. So other people may find this method confusing. So, whether you find this confusing or helpful, it doesn't matter. This is just one of the possible approaches to modal soloing. So if this helps you, great. If not, there are other methods, all of which can be found on Zombie Guitar, of course. Yeah, that's going to do it for this lesson. Hopefully you guys liked this one. Thanks for watching. See you next time.